My boyfriend's wealthy parents ignored their grumpy old gardener, struggling right in front of them. I, however, stopped to help. I didn't realize that the family's intimidating matriarch was watching the entire scene from an upstairs window. Later, when she finally introduced me to her reclusive billionaire husband, he already knew who I was. But before we reach that tense garden party, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? Share in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for daily news stories. Now, back to that long, nerve-wracking car ride. Driving to the Prescott family estate felt like entering another world. Every mile replaced my familiar, comfortable surroundings with manicured hills and imposing stone gates. I sat in the passenger seat of my boyfriend Jacob's car, hands clenched in my lap, anxiety twisting my stomach into knots. Today, I would meet his family for the first time. According to Jacob, it wasn't a social visit. It was a judgment. "Remember the key players," he said, his usually calm voice tight with unusual nervousness. He was rehearsing the introductions for the third time. "My father, Philip, will talk about business. Just nod and look interested. My mother, Isabel, will ask about your family. Keep your answers vague. And my grandmother, Vivian. She's the one you need to win over. She's the real head of the family. She hardly speaks, but she notices everything. Be polite, be respectful, and whatever you do, don't show weakness." "Weakness?" I asked. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know," he said, frustrated. "Just try to be perfect, okay?" I loved Jacob, but I hated this. I hated feeling like I needed to audition for the right to be with him. I was a good person, a pediatric nurse, kind and capable, but in the Prescott's world, my value seemed measured by a much colder, unfamiliar standard. We finally turned onto the long, private road leading to the estate. The house itself was breathtaking, a sprawling stone manor, reminiscent of the English countryside. Anxiety reached a peak as we pulled up the circular driveway, and that's when I saw him. An old man, dressed in muddy, worn overalls and a faded cap, knelt by a magnificent bed of prize-winning roses. He was struggling with a heavy wheelbarrow stuck in the soft earth. His face was deeply lined, his back straining with effort. He was clearly the estate's gardener. Just as we were about to step out, the grand doors opened. Jacob's parents, Philip and Isabel, emerged, epitomizing casual, old-money elegance. They saw the gardener struggling nearby. Philip gave a dismissive shake of his head. "Honestly, the quality of staff these days is appalling," he muttered. Then, without a second glance at him, they turned to us. Their greeting to Jacob was warm. Their greeting to me was politely chilly. "So, you must be Nora," Isabel said, her eyes quickly scanning my simple yet respectable dress. I barely registered her words. My focus stayed on the old man, still battling the wheelbarrow. Watching their casual, callous disregard sparked something quiet but intense within me. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, polite but firm, cutting Isabel off mid-sentence. Before anyone could react, I walked across the lawn to the gardener. "That looks heavy," I said with a warm smile. "Need a—" He looked up, eyes a piercing blue, wide with surprise. "Oh no, miss," he said, grunting. "You'll ruin your dress." "Nonsense," I replied. "A dress can be cleaned." I grabbed the other handle, and together we freed the wheelbarrow, with a heave, pushing it to the edge of the rose garden. "Thank you, young lady," he said, breathing heavily. "That was very kind. Everyone needs a helping hand sometimes," I said simply. From the porch, I could see my audience frozen in disbelief. I had broken every rule, ignored the hosts, delayed the formal greeting, and got my dress dirty helping the staff. I gave the gardener a final smile and turned back toward the porch, ready for judgment. Isabel's face was the embodiment of disdain. "Well," she said, voice sweet but icy, It seems you've already found your level here. How rustic. Jacob looked mortified, and I felt a flash of anger, but held my head high. They treated the mud on my dress as a stain on their family's honor, certain it proved my unsuitability. Little did they know that mud was about to make me the most welcome guest at the party. Standing on the slate-tiled porch, I felt the weight of Isabel's words, the polished barb meant to remind me of my place. I looked at Jacob. His expression mirrored my own pain. He opened his mouth to defend me, but I shook my head slightly. Not now. I'm so sorry, Nora, he whispered, as his parents moved on. She shouldn't have said that, he added, voice tense. I know, I said, offering a weak smile. You warned me. He grasped my hand. Let's just leave. We don't have to do this. I looked past him at the sunlit garden, where the party unfolded, guests in linen suits and floral dresses, laughing, sipping champagne. Leaving would confirm everything his parents already thought, that I didn't belong here. No, I said, voice steadier than I felt. We're not leaving. I'm here for you, not them. He squeezed my hand, relief and gratitude shining in his eyes, and together we entered the party, the Lion's Den. The event was a masterpiece of old money elegance. A string quartet played softly. Waiters in crisp white jackets glided through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The scent of perfume and thousands of prize-winning roses filled the air, beautiful but cold, performative, staged. For the next hour, I hovered at Jacob's side. His parents introduced me with careful, pointed politeness. This is Jacob's new friend, Nora. Isabel emphasized on friend, subtly dismissing our relationship. She's a pediatric nurse, such noble work, she added, her tone implying it was quaint but insignificant. I smiled, shook hands, endured the appraising glances. From the corner of my eye, I occasionally saw the gardener, Theodore, not mingling, not performing, just quietly working in a remote corner of the garden, deliberate, purposeful, real. The only other genuine presence here. Jacob did his best. He stayed by my side, gently steering conversations toward my interests. Art, literature, volunteer work, but his parents were masters of social control, redirecting every conversation to their preferred topics: stocks, European trips, and the staggering cost of maintaining such a property. I found myself talking to Philip, a man who measured worth by net value. So Nora, he said, peering over his champagne flute, Jacob tells me you live in the city, in a small apartment. It must be difficult. Noise, crime. We believe in giving our children space to breathe. Before I could respond, Jacob jumped in. Dad, Nora's apartment is beautiful. I gently placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. I wouldn't let them make me the source of conflict between Jacob and his parents. I turned to Philip with a calm, polite smile. It's small, but it's home, and I love it. My quiet refusal to be baited, to be ashamed of my life, seemed to unsettle them more than any argument could. The energy of the party shifted. There was a tangible change in the atmosphere, like the air itself had dropped in temperature. A hush fell over the crowd. I looked toward the main terrace and saw her, the matriarch, Vivienne, taller and more formidable than Jacob had described. She moved with effortless elegance, snow-white hair swept into a perfect chignon. She surveyed the gathering like a queen. The crowd instinctively parted as she began her slow, regal descent into the garden. Philip and Isabel, who had been self-important just moments ago, now rushed to their mother's side, expressions shifting from arrogant confidence to fawning deference. The true center of power was unmistakable. She moved through the party like a ship cutting through water, offering a brief nod or polite word here and there. With every step, she drew closer to us. Jacob, this is it, he whispered. Just be polite. Don't say too much. Let her lead. Vivienne reached our corner of the garden. Her children hovered beside her. Mother, Isabel said, voice a little too bright, trying to manage the narrative, I'd like you to meet Jacob's friend. This is Nora. Vivienne turned her piercing, hawk-like blue eyes to me, scanning my simple dress, my nervous but polite smile, and my anxious boyfriend. Then her gaze stopped, locking on the small smudge of dirt on my sleeve, the last trace of my encounter with the gardener. My heart stopped. Jacob's parents had judged me for that smudge. Now the true matriarch, the ultimate arbiter, was focused on it. I had no idea whether her verdict would be my ruin or my vindication. I stood there, silent, on the perfectly manicured lawn, under her intelligent, unreadable gaze. The mud on my dress, once a mark of shame to Isabel, was now Exhibit A. Jacob took a half-step forward, mouth opening to defend me, but Isabel's smug expression expected the final verdict. Vivienne raised a single, elegant hand. Jacob's mouth snapped shut. Isabel's smirk faltered. The matriarch was in session, and she would not be interrupted. Her eyes remained fixed on me, but her voice when she spoke was calm, clear, and neutral. That is a lovely dress, my dear. It seems to have met with some misfortune. Tell me, what happened? It was a test. I knew it. She was offering the chance to lie, to excuse, to blame. She was testing integrity. She just arrived, Isabel interjected, voice too bright. She had a clumsy moment outside. Nora, you should have gone inside to freshen up. Vivienne's gaze turned slowly to her daughter, cold enough to freeze fire. I was not speaking to you, Isabel, she said, voice dropping an octave. She returned her attention to me, eyebrows raised expectantly. My name is Nora, ma'am, I said quietly but steadily. It wasn't a clumsy moment. I was helping your gardener. His wheelbarrow was stuck down by the rose bushes. The words hung in the air. Isabel's face flashed with horror. I had confessed to kneeling in the dirt with the hired help, a social crime in her eyes. But Vivienne's expression remained unreadable. The gardener, she said, still neutral. You mean Theodore? Her knowledge of his name, the fact he was not an anonymous servant, was the first subtle clue that my footing was steadier than I thought. Yes, I replied. Theodore. He was struggling. I see, she said, silent for a long moment, eyes locked on mine. Then, almost imperceptibly, a small smile touched her lips. She turned to her daughter and son-in-law, who shifted uncomfortably. How very interesting, she said, tone now edged with sharp, ironic amusement. My husband has wrestled with that same wheelbarrow all morning. The back wheel is warped, and yet no one in his own family offered to help. But you, a guest, on your first visit, that is very telling. The preliminary verdict was clear, and it was in my favor. Isabel and Philip's faces drained of color. They had tried to weaponize my compassion, and Vivienne had just turned it back on them. They were revealed not as powerful arbiters, but as inattentive, self-absorbed children. Vivienne then did something that shocked her family further. She stepped forward, took my arm, a public gesture of unmistakable alliance. Nora, she said, voice now carrying across the nearby guests, you are a woman of character. I find that deeply refreshing. Walk with me. It is long past time you met the most important person in this family. She began leading me across the lawn, leaving Jacob and his stunned, humiliated parents behind. My mind raced. I had survived the trial. I had won. And now, I was being taken to meet the final mysterious authority, the patriarch she had spoken of with reverence. I assumed it would be some visiting dignitary, a powerful business partner, a final test. But then I saw him. In the center of a circular rose grove, surrounded by prize-winning blooms, was the gardener. On his hands and knees, back turned to us, focused entirely on tending the soil around a deep red rose bush. Still in muddy overalls and a worn cap, he seemed entirely at peace, oblivious to the drama just yards away. Vivienne slowed, a soft, loving smile on her face, as she looked at him. I was utterly confused. Why had she brought me here? To show me the garden? We stopped at the edge of the rose bed. Jacob and his parents caught up, standing behind us, faces filled with baffled apprehension. "Theodore, my love," Vivienne called, her voice gentle yet carrying through the quiet garden. "There is someone I would like you to meet." The gardener looked up from his work. A warm, genuine smile spread across his tired, lined face when he saw his wife. Then he noticed me standing beside her, and his piercing blue eyes twinkled with familiar recognition. Slowly, with the groan of old joints, he rose, wiping his soil-caked hands on the sides of his overalls. Jacob looked like his brain was about to short-circuit. His parents stood pale, mouths slightly open, as if witnessing a scene that defied all the rules of their social world. Vivienne turned her gaze from him to me, then swept over her children with a look of profound finality. "Nora," she said, voice clear and commanding, "I would like you to properly meet my husband of 60 years. The man who designed and planted every flower in this garden with his own hands. The man whose hard work is the true foundation of the Prescott family fortune. My husband, Theodore." The world tilted. The grumpy, kind-hearted gardener I had helped, the man my would-be in-laws had dismissed as an incompetent servant, was the reclusive, legendary, and all-powerful patriarch of the Prescott family. Philip and Isabel's faces crumbled from confusion to pure, abject horror. They hadn't just been rude to a staff member. They had shown disdain for their own father in front of a guest, failing his test in the most public way imaginable. Theodore ignored his children completely and walked straight to me, extending his hand, a warm smile on his face. "Nora," he said, voice kind and raspy, "it is a genuine pleasure to meet you properly. My wife has told me for years that our children have become so focused on the fruits of my labor that they've forgotten its value. Thank you for proving that at least one person in this generation remembers what it means to get their hands a little dirty for someone else." I shook his hand, still slightly grimy from the wheelbarrow. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Prescott. Please," he said, smiling, "call me Theodore." He then turned to Philip and Isabel, still frozen in silent humiliation. His expression sharpened. "Philip, Isabel," he said, voice firm, "we will have a long conversation in my study after the party. It seems a re-education on the core values of this family is long overdue." Standing there between the two most powerful people I had ever met, I realized the test was over, and I had passed. For Jacob's parents, however, the real examination of character had only just begun. Walking back from the rose garden to the main party was surreal and triumphant. I was flanked by the legendary matriarch Vivienne on one side and the disguised patriarch Theodore on the other. He had wiped his hands on a silk handkerchief provided by his wife, but had refused to remove his muddy overalls. A deliberate statement. He was proud of his work and would not pretend to be anyone else. Jacob walked beside us, joy written across his face. Behind us trailed Philip and Isabel, like two disgraced courtiers, pale and humiliated. Re-entering the main party, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The guests, who had been observing our procession, seemed to hold their collective breath. Vivienne guided me and Jacob to her private central table. Theodore sat at the head, a seat of undeniable authority, Vivienne at his right hand, and a place of honor was indicated for me. The rest of the afternoon became a master class in quiet, elegant justice, executed not by me, but by the matriarch. The roles were reversed. My would-be in-laws were on trial. Vivienne and Theodore spoke to me almost exclusively, ignoring their children entirely. They asked about my life, my nursing work, my passion for helping others. Theodore, a passionate amateur botanist, was genuinely interested in my community garden project, asking detailed, thoughtful questions with sincere curiosity. I became the center of attention. Influential guests, seeing where real respect now lay, gravitated toward our table, not Philip and Isabel, but me. The quiet, middle-class girl who had been expected to be a social outcast was now the honored guest. Philip and Isabel had to watch from the far end of the table, silently humiliated as the woman they had deemed unworthy was celebrated by the family whose approval they most desired. Their perfect party had become a stage for their public shaming. As the evening ended, the grandparents escorted us to the car. Theodore took both my hands, rough and calloused from years of work in the soil. "Nora," he said warmly, "you have a good heart and strong character. You are always welcome in this home and in this garden." Vivian turned to her son and daughter-in-law, voice icy. "Philip, Isabel, you will apologize to this young woman for your appalling behavior today. She is a credit to this family, a fact you were too blind and snobbish to see. Do not make the mistake of losing her for your son." The drive home was filled with comfortable, happy silence. Then Jacob took my hand. "I've never seen my parents so completely silenced," he said, awe in his voice. "They didn't see you, Nora. They saw the real you, the person I fell in love with." I watched the sunset, the sky painted in orange and gold. My vindication was sweeter than I could have imagined. I hadn't won them over by pretending to be someone else. I had won by being kind, genuine, and unafraid to get a little dirt on my dress. The Prescott family fortune was built on hard work and character, a truth the younger generation had forgotten. My future with Jacob was secure, not because I passed shallow tests, but because I had unknowingly passed the one test that truly mattered. An absolutely heartwarming story showing that true character is the most valuable asset. What did you think of the way Vivian and Theodore tested their family? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you loved this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell to never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.